stickers, as well as comfortable, and let's give it up for Dr. Van Abbott.
Thank you so much, Red. And thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. I get depressed about some things, but I don't get depressed about this. Right? There was a high school student that called me today for like a class interview named Silas, and he used the word penultimate on the phone. I was like, okay, who are you? But he said, is this the federal government's job? Is it the state government job? Is it business's job? Is it individual's job? And I asked him what he thought. And he said, I think we probably need all those people involved. And we do. And so I'll give a little bit of an update on the kind of ecological status of the lake, but I want it to be very conversational. So cut me off at any time if you disagree with things, if you've got questions or things to add. Then the highest form of learning is a quiz. And so the whole presentation today is in quiz form. So the first quiz question is, how much of the Earth's surface is endorheic? Somebody know what endorheic means?
So,
Say it loud.
no outlet to the ocean.
No outlet to the ocean. So endo means within, and reic means flowing. So if you think about all the land surfaces on the planet, what percentage of them don't drain to the ocean? Who says 5%? 10%? 15? 20? 25? 50? Okay, we got a couple of you up there high. Turns out about a fifth of the Earth's surface is internally draining. And what's interesting about that is those places aren't randomly distributed throughout the Earth system. They only occur where you have semi-arid or arid conditions. Because think about it, what happens if you've got enough precipitation? What does the water eventually do? It'll erode and cut a channel to the ocean. So it's only in deserts and semi-arid regions like where we live that you get these internally draining basins. Here's a map that shows where they're actually located. So it's the areas that are gray. And again, you see them kind of in those bands away from the equator where you have desertic conditions. They occur on every continent. This one doesn't show. There actually are some dry valleys in Antarctica that are also internally draining. So there's some salt lakes in Antarctica as well. Okay, second quiz question. What percentage of global lake volume, so of the water that exists in lakes, what percentage of it is happening in these saline lakes and endorheic basins? So 20% of the Earth's surface is internally draining. How much of the Earth's lake volume is in those areas? Who says 2%? 10%? 25? 35? 50? 120? We got one, yeah, two there, good. You guys must be math majors. So the answer is, well, give me a drum roll on this one. The answer is 50%. 50% of the Earth's lake volume is in these saline lakes. And that's a surprise to most people, as it is to us tonight. Because we sometimes get into a mindset where it's like, oh, Great Salt Lake is so weird. Lakes are supposed to be fresh, right? Well, that's just not the case. Half of the Earth's lake volume is in these saline lakes. What's the largest terminal or saline lake in the world? Caspian Sea, Loch Nor, Lake Victoria, Great Salt Lake, Lake Corangamite, Aral Sea, Mar Chiquita. Okay, not everybody raised their hands. Where else? Mediterranean Sea, not an endorheic lake. All of these are endorheic lakes. They're some of the largest on the respective continents. But the biggest one is he? No. Great Salt Lake is not even currently the largest in the Western Hemisphere. Oh, we got downgraded.
Say the Aral Sea, but I thought it was.
So the Aral Sea used to be it was larger than Great Salt Lake, but it's 95% gone. Yes. The Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is not only the world's largest saline lake, it's the world's largest inland water body, period. It's enormous. It's also in absolute crisis because, well, won't give you the answer because I think it's a quiz question. All right, how much of global saline lake area has been lost? So what percentage of the way gone are these ecosystems? 10%? 25%? 35? 60? 95? 120? Here we got a couple of math majors again, a new one. Hey, welcome, Shannon. 60% globally. And it's interesting, that's right where we're sitting with Great Salt Lake as well. 60% of the lake's area is gone. And this is a map, oh, it looks like it's zoomed in a little bit too far. But the color represents how much of the lake is gone. The darker the red, the higher the percentage. And notice how many of them are in that dark 88 to 100% loss. So this is a global phenomenon. And here are some time series just showing some of the different lakes. What do you notice looking at these lines? Anything stand out? They're just lines, right? But I like to imagine what's the story behind that. So you've got the Dead Sea is the orange one that's slowly coming down. And this is all expressed in the percentage of the maximum volume, right? So as it's like the percentage that's left. So the Aral Sea is this blue line, right, that's gone down there. Owens Lake, you can see it's completely gone and comes back in a couple of years. So each one of these is a different story. Is there anything that you notice in these lines?
They're all going down.
So there are two comments here. Lots of ups and downs on some of them, they fluctuate. And then generally, most of them are headed down despite those ups and downs. I think those are both two important observations. The what's happening in 2004. Yeah. So Lake Ermia was kind of going through its natural fluctuations up and down. A little bit of an upward trend just because of local weather variability. And then this is when there was a change. Anybody know where Lake Ermia is? It's in Iran. And so when international sanctions were put in place against Iran, all of a sudden they had to grow more of their own food. They diverted rivers and tried to subsidize the economy to prevent local civil unrest. And that ended up destroying the lake. So you see these interactions between the first law of ecology is everything is connected to everything else. And we don't say that in a figurative sense, right? Policy of the UN and the US impacted local domestic policy and resulted in the death of that lake. So the fact that these go up and down actually presents a real challenge for us here in Great Salt Lake, because we're going to be talking with lawmakers and citizens who don't have, who don't understand the big picture. That's by no fault of theirs, right? We shouldn't be judgmental. We're all coming from different backgrounds. Thankfully, you're not all like me and studying these lakes full time, right? Glad you have different hobbies and interests. But you're going to hear lawmakers say things like, Great Salt Lake's been declining for thousands of years, right? Since Lake Bongo. Or we just heard from the Speaker of the House. The lake goes up and down. Right? And I'm not saying that is some great criticism, but we've got to be able to say, well, yeah, the lake does go up and down. It used to go up and down a flat line. And now it's going up and down a line that's tilted downward. So when we get a couple of wet years and the lake comes up, we spike the football and say, the job's done, right? No, that's how we expect the lake to act. Similarly, when we have dry years, the lakes are going to drop more. So we've got to be thinking about the long-term trend. Any questions or other thoughts about any of this?
They're all going down in the age of petroleum.
Yeah, so they're all going down in the age of the petroleum or the Anthropocene, right? This is one of the indicators of the Anthropocene.
Before what looks like the 1980s, where it had that big spike, is the lake currently at levels that most people would have seen that most of their lives?
As far as Great Salt Lake. Yeah.
Great Salt Lake.
So this paper is 7 years old, and so Great Salt Lake since that time has dropped substantially. So we're somewhere around here. And So we're at a stage that most people haven't seen in their lifetime, but quite a few people were alive when this happened, right? When the lake peaked. And that was because of natural weather variability. It's called a pluvial, a time period where you get above average precipitation. And people say, that was the all-time high. And that's not true. The lake has been higher than that in recent history. That's just in the last couple of centuries when we have direct measurements when the lake was high. That was actually very close to its long-term average elevation. So we were freaking out in the 1980s saying, the lake is too high. Why? Because we were so used to it being low. It had been low because of agricultural diversions. And so we built a bunch of stuff in the lake's natural footprint. And then we kind of freaked out when the lake even got close to taking up as much space as it naturally would have all along. So I don't think I added this to the quiz, but does anybody know how many feet below where the lake would be? The lake is today because of water use.
22.
22 feet. That's one of the estimates, between 15 and 25 feet. So think about that for a second. I think that actually creates a pretty stark visual. When somebody says the lake just goes up and down, you can say, well, it does, and it would be 15 to 25 feet higher today if we weren't taking so much water. Okay. So, all right. So now let's talk about consequences. Why do we care that these lakes disappear? Which of the following consequences has not been caused by the loss of saline lakes? Got to pick just one. Look at these and say, raise your hand when you think it's the one that hasn't been caused by the loss of these lakes. A rebound of the Earth's crust, increase in global sea level, change in the tilt of the Earth. That one's got to be fake, right? Destruction of agriculture, damage to public health, extinction of wildlife. This is the only trick question, because all of these have actually been caused by the decline of saline lakes. There was a study that just showed we've moved mass in the Earth, right? That used to be up at high elevations in these saline lakes. We've diverted the water, it evaporates, it gets precipitated outside the watershed. It contributes to sea level rise. In fact, it's the second largest contributor to sea level rise after the melting of glaciers and ice sheets. And when you do that, if you've ever done that trick with a wheel, and when you're sitting on the rotating chair, gyroscopic force, when you move that mass around, it changes the tilt of the Earth. So there's been a measurable change in the actual tilt of the planet. Now, that's more of a gee whiz fact, right, than anything else. But again, when we live in the age of humans, the Anthropocene, and so we need to remember how powerful we are. The things that we do really matter. The two that really I think about most are down at the bottom of the list, right? Harm to people, harm to other life. And it's pretty extreme. This is just a picture showing the geophysical effects of the loss of Great Salt Lake. The lines represent rebound of the Earth's crust. So as we've lost so much of the lake's volume, about 75% of the water that used to be in Great Salt Lake is no longer there. That's why we call it the ongoing collapse of the lake. It's not something that's in the far future. We're living it today. It's actually triggered a bunch of small earthquakes. Most of them are micro earthquakes that you can't feel, but this is a paper from a few years ago estimating that 66 cubic miles of water. Imagine that. You ride your bike, drive a car 66 miles, and then multiply that by 3 to make a giant cube. That is the amount of water we're exporting from these systems each year. So you can see the decline in the volume of the lake, and then that directly translates into increase in global sea level. But I kind of boil it down to those 2 points. Are we going to exercise the vision that we need to take care of one another and to take care of the other life, which ultimately in the age of humans depends on us. And so it's a matter of values. And many of you have heard Darren Perry talk about this. And he says, this isn't a water problem. It's not even a money problem, it's a people problem. And he doesn't, I don't think he's saying that in a misanthropic way. He's not saying people are bad, right? In fact, because it's us, it means that we can be the solution. And this is a picture of the Salton Sea, one of these large saline lakes, a dust storm coming off of it. One of the important impacts is that air pollution. The dust also can damage soils. So you can see the agricultural fields here, which are in other areas causing the decline of these lakes. And then the crops are damaged, the soil fertility goes down. Here are a couple pictures of snowpack as it should be on top, and then what it looks like recently with more and more dust being deposited on it. It's estimated in 2022, when the lake reached its low point, snowmelt happened 17 days earlier than it would have because of the dust being deposited on the snow. And so when somebody says, we don't care about Great Salt Lake, I can't even see it from my house, this dust gets transported hundreds of miles. And in fact, the fine particulates from the dust can be transported all over the world. We're all downwind of Great Salt Lake. And I wasn't alive, but people told me about Mount St. Helens. Right? Does anybody remember what happened with Mount St. Helens? Blew up. And then Oregon had a pithy bumper sticker that they shared. Anybody remember what that was? Was it Oregon or Washington? Oregon. Yeah, so Mount St. Helens blew up. Yeah, will somebody Google it for us right now? Don't want to have false information. I think it's Oregon. It's Washington. Thanks, Todd. And those are states on the West Coast. Is that right? I've heard about it. So yeah, Washington said, don't come to Washington. Washington will come to you. Because the ash from Mount St. Helens was getting deposited all over the country. Well, we don't want to do the same thing here. Right? We don't want that dust to be all over the country. And when we're looking at the acute impacts, it really is all of northern Utah, where most people live, but it goes over into Cache Valley. It goes over into Park City. It's not just where you can see the lake. And in fact, Brigham City and Cache Valley, it looks like, are bearing a lot of the brunt. They're hit more often with these dust storms off the lake bed than we are here, a little bit farther south. So that's going to be one of the challenges too. For people that can't see the lake, how do we help them feel connected to the lake? And then the lake is also important for a bunch of economic reasons. Anybody know what these are? They're evaporation ponds. And I think that they're beautiful, like in lots of ways. The salt gets more and more concentrated as you get toward the orange colors. And then that's the microbial community that goes from green algae over here to halophilic bacteria where it's more concentrated. And then those salts actually go into a huge number of products. And this is some pictures from the Great Salt Lake Commissioner showing that what we extract from Great Salt Lake is used in industry all around the world. And also, Great Salt Lake feeds people. So aquaculture, globally, the production of shrimp, about half of all shrimp that are farmed depend on brine shrimp from Great Salt Lake. So when people say, why should we care about a salty lake? We're using the water to grow food. You can actually say, well, Great Salt Lake actually supports a lot more food than the alfalfa that we're growing here in the watershed. Not that it's unimportant. I actually usually don't bring that up, right? Because it's comparing, it's just going to create conflict. But certainly there's value in the lake. And then the potash from the lake is used as fertilizer for stone fruits and nut fruits. So much of the agricultural production in California depends on fertilizer from Great Salt Lake. And then I just love this picture by Marianne Connor. Anybody know what kind of bird this is? Ear grebe. Looks like a crazy dinosaur, doesn't it? Remember, birds are dinosaurs. Another gee whiz fun fact. But it's just representative, right? Around 12 million migratory birds move through the Great Salt Lake corridor each year. Over 400 species of birds. And they show up looking for a place to refuel, a place to reproduce. And they're depending on us to make sure that that place stays here. right? They can't look at the news and say, I'm going to pick a different lake to fly toward, right? We need to make sure that every year that food is there. And that food is mainly takes the form of two organisms with Great Salt Lake. It's a pretty simple food chain. The brine flies, and yeah, Marianne Carter put together these figures. 9,000 larvae per square foot, right? So imagine 9,000 little brothers and sisters. They're growing, feeding on the microbial mats. And if you convert that to the primary and secondary productivity of a rainforest, Great Salt Lake beats it out. So Great Salt Lake is more productive as an ecosystem than a tropical rainforest. And then the brine shrimp on the right. And during the peak season, there can be 17 trillion brine shrimp in Great Salt Lake. Which brings us to the most important quiz question of the night. At peak season, those 17 trillion brine shrimp weigh as much as how many people? We were to put them on a big scale. Who says 150,000? Million? 1.5 million? 2 million? 2.5 million? Well, when you don't know, just guess in the middle. And this is not something that anybody really should know, but it is kind of gee whiz. 1.5 million people. So imagine like what that would look like. More than half of Utah's population out there swimming in the lake at the same time. So peak season is kind of after the algal blooms hit in July and August, and so end of August and September. And it's really interesting. The lake is a bright green color when those algal blooms are there. And then the brine shrimp are feeding off of those sestonic algae. And so the lake turns clear because there are so many of them. So you can see it from space, the impact of these tiny creatures. And again, I love that as a metaphor for what we're trying to do. Right? No one of us is able to clear out the lake or to refill the lake on our own. But working together, things much smaller than us have an enormous impact. Other lakes elsewhere support other species, right? These are flamingos. There's an amazing similar migration through Africa and Europe and Asia of these birds living and using the saline lakes. But I think most of all about the human impacts. And here are two pictures that I really like. The one on the left is Mar Chiquita in Argentina. That lake is currently a little bit larger than Great Salt Lake. So these are the two largest saline lakes in the Western Hemisphere. And some of the same birds bounce back and forth between them. But what you see here is a dust cloud that is around 600 miles long, coming from the lake bed, destroying agricultural lands. And over here on the right side are pictures of boats from the Aral Sea, right? Just out in the middle of the desert. But this is the picture that stays with me the most. It's the Uru people from Bolivia. So there was a lake there, Lake Popo, that actually, Lake Titicaca is super, super high, right? And then there's a river that runs down into Bolivia. It flows into Lake Popo, or it used to flow into Lake Popo. And then demand for quinoa around the world caused the local farmers to start diverting more of that river and growing more quinoa. And Lake Popo has now been completely destroyed. And the Uru people, their name means people of the lake. They literally lived on the lake on reed maps. You might have seen them in National Geographic. And now they've been completely displaced. And so I was taught when I was doing my undergraduate, was taught this sustainable development model. Has anybody seen a figure like this? Sustainable development's at the intersection of these three things, right? It's that little tiny circle. That's where we should be aiming. But I think that this model is wrong. And in some ways even misleading. Because what we know is that we live in a nested system. And it's not a competition between the environment and the economy, or the economy and society, right? All of society exists within the Earth system. And the economy is just a part of what we're trying to do, right, as a species. So I really think that we need to keep coming back to this view here. Any criticisms? Or I shared this with a group of economists, and one of them literally called me up afterwards and said, actually, I think the economy is more important than you're giving it credit for. I wasn't saying it was unimportant. It's just smaller. Small things are important. Okay, just a couple more questions. What is causing the decline of these lakes? Urban expansion, too many people. Irrigated agriculture. Climate change. Drought. Fracking. Okay, all of them but fracking actually probably does have a small impact, right? Some consumptive water usage is that. This is a pretty simple story. As far as stories go, the largest driver is irrigated agriculture. It's not the only driver, and each of these lakes has a slightly different picture, right? The range globally is between 70 and 90% of the decline is caused by irrigated agriculture. Now, climate change contributes to the status of the lake. It's making it harder for the lakes to stay where they used to be. And then the drought, right, short-term weather variability, that accounts for more of the big ups and downs, not the long-term trajectory in these lakes. And so there's a simple, this is the only equation in tonight's presentation, but here's the water balance for these lakes. The amount of water in the lake is equal to the runoff flowing into the lake, plus the direct precipitation into the lake, right? So these lakes are so huge that the rain and snow that falls into them actually represents a really big part of their water budget. With Great Salt Lake, it's about a third of the lake's water budget. Isn't that incredible? It's the rain and snow falling directly into the water. And then the only outlet for these lakes is evaporation. And so this is the equation we got to be thinking about if we want to refill the lakes. And then let's think about the human impacts. Which of these are we impacting on the right side of the equation? Which of them are we impacting and how? So runoff, how are we impacting runoff? So we're diverting the water. We're using it for agriculture, cities, and industry. Right? It's about, I think of it as an 80-10-10 pie. So 80% of that water consumption is ag, 10% is cities, 10% is industry. That's a little bit simplified, right? But it gets you pretty close. All right. What about direct precipitation? We impacting that at all? We got a big yes here from a professor. How are we impacting precipitation?
So with climate change, we're altering precipitation patterns, both variability year to year, but also persistent storms.
Yeah, great. So this is mainly a climate, that's where climate change comes in, right? The changes in precipitation. And then we're also, climate change is impacting evaporation as well. But it's interesting. The hydrological team led by Dave Tarbotton at USU has found that the lake is about 10 times more sensitive to changes in runoff than it is to changes in evaporation. And that's for a variety of reasons. So we've unfortunately turned down the most important dial, right, for the lake's health, which is runoff. That's where we need to be focused on. And that's why we named our movement Grow the Flow. Right? We want to turn that dial back up because the lake doesn't respond to the number of news articles that are written about it, doesn't even respond to the number of bills or the amount of money we spend on it. Right? We've learned over the past few years that we can spend a huge amount of money and not solve the problem. What does the lake respond to? Water. And so our motto is water the lake. Say it all together. Water the lake. Okay, we can skip through a couple of these. I just want to have a couple slides and then turn it over to Tom on kind of the status of the supply right now. Okay. So how much water conservation do we need? You know, are we talking about shorter showers, or are we talking about Las Vegas, right? Where anybody ever gotten a ticket in Las Vegas for watering your lawn? I've never lived there, but I have family members who have. So you can get a ticket if you have too much grass, right? Or if you water at the wrong times of day. So where are we in that range? Who says we need to consume 10% less water? Already pretty good. 20? 30? 40? 50? Okay. So I don't think anybody voted for 10, but all the others had representatives. Well, this actually is an it depends answer. So it depends on how quick we want to refill the lake. Right? If you say we want to just barely get the lake to a stable point and then fill it up, you know, by a centimeter a year, then that's gonna take less conservation. What else does it depend on?
Rainfall.
So future weather. Right? What is this natural supply going to do? And we know that's not stationary, it's changing. So far, there hasn't been a decrease in the amount of precipitation, but there has been an increase in evaporation. So the runoff has started to decline. And it's predicted that by the end of the century, we'll probably have between 15 and 20% less runoff naturally than we used to because of human-caused climate change. So that's going on. It's currently not the main figure. If we are thinking about 10 to 20 years, we want to refill the lake in 10 to 20 years, then it's very substantial. It's a third to a half less water. And we as individuals can't drink a third to a half less water and stay safe, stay healthy. I only drink Diet Coke so that I'm not contributing to the problem. But that is a joke. So this is the map or the table that shows, and I think this is a really helpful tool. This comes from the state itself, because you're going to hear a lot of different numbers about what our target should be, what we should be aiming for. If you take the state's own numbers, if you want to refill the lake in 10 years or even 20 years, then these are crazy numbers, right? These are all expressed in thousands of acre feet of water. So an acre foot is, imagine an acre and cover it with a foot of water. If I'm remembering right, it's around 1/3 million gallons in 1 acre foot. And so this is why whenever anybody says that we've saved however many gallons of water, you can know for sure that that amount of water is insignificant. If you're expressing it in gallons, it's like if I were to say, I'm a millionaire in pennies. I guess that's not even true. That's false advertising. I'm doing some great math. I'm going to work on my savings here. We're talking about big amounts of water, right? Thousands of acre feet. And the range that I think we should be aiming for is between 700,000 and 1.2 million acre feet of water a year. And that gets us into that 30 to 50% decrease in consumptive water use. And there's some people who have just said, we can't do it. That's not possible. And we actually have examples from around the world where people have done it. We also have examples from specific farms where they've had 50 to 80% decrease in water consumption by shifting to crops that don't consume as much water, by avoiding water waste. So I think it's actually good news that right now we're living quite wastefully, because that gives us a big margin to improve. But it raises this difficult question of how are we going to do it? And that's much more of a communal action, government. It's much more of a social science problem. Right? The hydrology is simple. The lake needs more water. We need to divert less of it. The real complexity comes in with how do we work together as a state, as a nation, during a time that's really divided, right? Where we don't trust each other, where we think that the other half of the country are bad people, regardless of what side we start on. And I think that the race to save Great Salt Lake is an opportunity, even if it's just temporary, to try to work together, to try to say we don't agree on a bunch of things. But that doesn't mean that we don't share the same home, because we're facing this crisis. And it's like, wasn't Alexander Hamilton who said, we need to hang together or we're all hang separately, right? Who was that? Tom, do you know? You weren't alive in the revolution. That's another one to Google, right? So we really need to hang together. And I think that it is students like yourself that are going to trace this path for us, right? Young people are actually less politically engaged than us old fogies. I just turned 40 a few days ago, so I feel very old now. So thank you. So it's an opportunity. So you're all involved at some level in Grow the Flow. Okay, I'm going to show one more figure, because one more quiz question here. So I really was excited in 2022 and early 2023 because it felt like we were driving a monster truck toward the finish line of saving Great Salt Lake. There was this feeling of nobody's restored a saline lake anywhere in the world. We're going to be the first. The governor's office was focused on it. The legislature was focused on it. It was the #1 issue for Republicans and Democrats in the public. They were concerned about Great Salt Lake. And then this happened. This was a picture that I took in early June in 2023. Like a snowstorm up in the
Where is
mountains, just behind Freedom Peak in Provo. And these big snow years came, right? And the lake came back up, and it was really exciting and encouraging. So the question is, after the lake reached its all-time low level in 2022, and with the 2 big water years, we kind of went back in time, right? The lake came up. And where is it sitting today?
Back down to
Right.
2021.
No, we're supposed to go through. So we'll all raise our hand. The answer is 2021. You guys, we're back. We're back where we were. So again, we can't count on big water years. Those are really helpful because in 2022, guess what? You could have spent as much money as you wanted. There was no water to send to the lake. Our reservoirs were empty, our aquifers are empty. That's not the case now. Our reservoirs are full. Most of the aquifers still are empty, but we can start to refill the lake. That's now a human problem, right? Before, that really was only a nature or God problem. There was nobody who could create that, call that water from the sky. But now we've got water in the bank, right? 2 million acre feet of water have gone into the reservoirs, right? So let's get that water to the lake. Here's the figure just updated today of kind of where we're sitting. So next time that somebody says, this is only going back to 2007, but next time that somebody says, oh, don't worry, we got those big water years. This is what happened last time we were at this level. Now, hopefully that's not going to happen again. Soil moisture is higher, so we're probably going to have a little bump up here, then come down. But we're still sitting right on the edge. And so we got to work together. Here are the 3 main programs of Grow to Flow. A public action network. We want to build a coalition that's unlike any coalition that's ever existed in the state. Think of that, 100,000 people who know about this issue coming from different political backgrounds. You know, we want you to call up your uncle who always has super uninformed, annoying opinions and is on the other side politically, whether it's the left or the right. We all have that uncle. If you don't, I've got 5. I will lend you. Mike, Tony, and some aunts too, Christy. You can go on. We want them to be a part of this movement. Right? The more different the person is that you're talking with, when you're on tracks or front runner, the better. Right? Don't push them away. We want to be organized. We want to be effective. I really am in awe of what you've done here with Slick, drawing people together to focus on this issue. And I want to recognize Ren as the founder of the Slick chapter. And all of you for supporting, whether or not you attend school here. And we increasingly have buy-in from the business community. We sometimes complain about developers, the legislature is all filled with greedy developers. Well, it turns out the developers care about this issue. Because if the lake's gone, property values go down. Already, the insurance agencies in Chicago are redlining portions of the land around Great Salt Lake, saying, we don't think that's a sound investment. We won't insure property there. Right? So there's a connection for everybody to the lake. And it's our job to become effective ambassadors for the lake and be able to speak for it in different ways. We have a team at the University of Utah who's running the Great Salt Lake Project. They're vetting legislation. They're considering different policies, market-based, regulatory, and everything in between. What's the most effective way that we can get water into the lake? And then we have a research bridge that's led by Rachel Wood at Brigham Young University that's bringing together businesses, innovators, entrepreneurs, and scientists to answer these questions about the social and technical and physical parts of the system. So whatever your background is, you're needed. I think that this is the conceptual kind of plan of the steps. Over the next few years, the goal is just to stabilize the lake, make sure it doesn't slip lower than it is today. Then refill the lake and then solidify those changes to make sure that we don't go backwards. And it is an uphill battle, but here are two thoughts that have come up again and again in these discussions. I deeply believe that we can save Great Salt Lake. I believe that it's our responsibility, and I believe that we can do it. But I also know that we're currently not on track to do it. We can't do it the way that we're acting now. And that I don't think that should inspire despair in us. It also shouldn't inspire blame in us. I think that it should inspire action in us. Like we're not on track. What can we do? Because we're all a part of this system. Like there's no separation between nature and people. What can we do differently to be that first community? And it's like the space race, right? Let's do it not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think that there's so much healing and potential in doing that together. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to turn over to Tom. Oh, I see. So for the, yeah.
You want to just start?
Or.
Yeah, it was like.
I'm gonna grab my water.
All right. Not gonna use that. All right, my name is Tom Moyer. I'm here with Mark Peterson and Bill Barron. We're all from Citizens Climate Lobby. Mark and I are the state co-coordinators for Utah, and we're volunteers. Bill is the regional coordinator for the Mountain West, and Bill's the only person in the state who gets paid to do this. Everybody else in our organization is a volunteer. We all put in our own time. I have a full-time job. I'm a mechanical engineer in military robotics. I do military driverless vehicles. Mark is retired from the electricity industry. And until recently, I was putting quarter time work into volunteering into CCL. Now work got too busy. I have to cut back to just being a regular volunteer. So we're going to try to teach you in 45 minutes a little bit about how to talk to legislators. How many of you have ever spoken to your state legislator? Awesome. Okay, how many know who your state legislators are? All right, that is more than I would have expected. That's phenomenal. By the time we're done, you're all going to know who your state legislators are, and hopefully you'll have some comfort level in speaking to them. Mark, do you want to take the next?
First, I want to make two complaints about the previous presentation. You're not what over here. You're not in the neighborhood of being old and important.
Yeah.
Not in the neighborhood. And then my other complaint is that was really good. I have to follow it. Okay, where am I looking? All right, so let's define lobbying and your invitation to lobbying. I saw quite a few people have already spoken to their legislators.
Can you speak a little louder?
Okay, sure. Okay. So defining lobbying and your invitation, is that any better? Is that okay? I can move up closer. And I saw a lot of people had spoken to or knew who their legislators are. So we're gonna go through just a little bit of piece of how you might effectively talk to those legislators, make an impact on what they vote for, how they vote, right? Another term for lobbying is advocacy, or asking for what you want. We're gonna try and help you understand how to most effectively ask for what you want. And then make it worth both your time and your legislature's time. You can do that if you want. Okay, so whether you know it or not, you're a trusted messenger, and you're a trusted messenger mostly because almost all of you said, yes, I know who my legislator is. And that means that you know you're a constituent for somebody. And so you're important to them. So you're an influential, important person to them. They're going to want to listen to you if you follow what we have to say, or at least I'll argue if you follow what we have to say, right? And you represent more than just yourself. You represent your community, the age group, the community in which you reside. The legislator thinks of you more than just a single person, right? And generally, legislators want to listen. They want to understand what people are thinking. Okay, we're going to talk about three different things. We call it CCL's unique approach. It is effective. It works. It is. We're going to talk about layers of political will, and we're going to talk about making the right asks. Usually, no one usually argues that, or it says that I don't speak well. Okay, so the CCL approach, we focus on what we're for rather than what we're against. Talking about what you're against creates a negative situation to start with. We always start a discussion when we're trying to lobby with that appreciation. Sometimes it's harder to find something to be appreciative of every legislator, but you can, we do. And the thing is, if you're nice to people and you say something nice to start, you end up having a lot better conversation than if you just start and then antagonistic. You start off in an argument, you're not likely to get better. So we always celebrate progress, and sometimes that progress is in really small steps. But still, it's important to celebrate that. And we don't want to let perfection kill progress. Meaning we're not after chomping off the whole thing all at once. Right? Small steps are okay, as long as it's moving in the right direction. So we say bipartisan here. We do the same discussion on a national level and the state. It's mostly Republican in the legislators, but we still talk about being bipartisan. If you solve things in a bipartisan manner, they last long.
Mark, can I jump in one thing before you change slides? I'm not going to tell the whole story, but that picture is a group of students, mostly from Logan High School, who wrote the state's first climate resolution, passed it in, I think it was 2018. Took them 2 years to pass it. They wrote, it got changed since the first version they wrote significantly, but it still contained the core of the idea. So students can make a difference. That's the signing ceremony with Governor Herbert.
Okay. Values. So why do we talk about this? I mean, businesses, colleges, everybody puts up a statement of values, and that's about it. Nobody pays any attention to it. This is not just about doing the right thing. These things work. They're effective. They make stuff happen. So look at those. See if you can agree with all of them, or some of them, or some might be more important to you than others, but they work. Doing the right thing is very effective. And this is a little bit more about us. I'm actually not trying to recruit folks, although if you're interested, I'll be around. But the primary reason that I'm involved with CCL is this first one: respect, appreciation, and gratitude. That's a real growth area for me. That does not come easy to me, especially when we're talking to those who oppose us or disagree with whatever I think. but it's highly effective. Even in a polarized society, where everybody wants to be just telling each other that each other are stupid. This approach works. Okay, solution focus, we talked about that. Optimism, it's great to hear the optimism about it's all that can be fixed. It works much better than pessimism. We are again nonpartisan, and then personal power. Everyone has a great deal of power, whether they realize it or not. Everyone can make an impact, a difference. All you have to do is take action. Okay, is that it for me? I wanted, you go ahead. Okay.
All right, speaking of optimism, I am by nature an optimistic person. I believe we can solve problems. I'm in this to solve problems. Optimism is also a political tool. You can choose to be optimistic. You will be more effective to choose that. Do you all believe we can solve the Great Salt Lake?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you all believe we can solve climate change?
Yes.
Do you believe we will?
We can.
Yes.
Or die trying? Thank you. I'll accept that. I believe we can solve both. Great Salt Lake is way easier than climate change. It's way more tractable. It is mostly in our control, in our state. Both parties are invested in solving it. We named our capital city after the thing. We're not gonna let it go away. We have the tools. Ben showed us, it's not technically beyond our means. It doesn't take more water than there is to solve it. We are going to solve it. It's just how long will it take us? So let's make it go faster. All right, I would like you all now to look up the names of your legislators. You don't have to type that whole thing in. You can probably just Google Utah legislative districts and that will come up first. You will put in your address without the city, just your street address and your zip code. You press go, press find, and it will tell you who your legislators are and it will give you their contact information. The contact information will include a phone number. It's very weird, but that is their personal cell phone. Our legislators do not have staff. They get a temporary intern during the legislative session, but they answer their own phones. That's how this works. They are part-time legislators. Most of them have other jobs. They are citizens and they respond to their constituents. When you contact them, please don't be a jerk to them. They don't like that. They tend not to want to interact with you again. If that's their, if their first contact with you is unpleasant, there probably won't be a second. If their first contact with you is pleasant, there will be many more. I really recommend having your first contact with your legislator just be a thank you for something. No ask, no nothing. Just send you a text, send you an email, wanted to let you know I like this thing that you did. I guarantee you, no matter who your legislator is, there will be something you can find that they did well. You might have to search pretty hard, but there will be something they did that you liked. I also think you should sign up for their mailing list, right? Many of these legislators have town halls. They're easily accessible. First time we went to lunch with a legislator, 20 years ago now for me, my reaction was, oh my God, I had no idea it was that easy. Just call them and say, you want to go to lunch? I said, yeah. Wow. Okay, do you all know who your legislators are now? Question?
My question is like, what are your thoughts or do you have any advice for reaching out to legislators other than your own? I've reached out to mine, she's kind of like it's preaching to the choir sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Love her, but
We deal with this issue of climate change as well. The most supportive members are urban Democrats. They are the least important to be talking to. Sorry, Democrats. You're already there. Most of them, right? Some of them still need help. Some of them are down in the dumps and like don't want to do anything because they've given up. I do not recommend flooding Republican legislators with texts and emails from urban Democrats. They just get grumpy. If you have two addresses, like one of them is in Taylorsville because you live here now and another is where you grew up, claim them both. Talk to whichever one seems the most important to be talking to, and tell them you're a constituent, because you kind of are. So I talk to legislators who I'm not their constituent, but I only do it after I have met them. Right, I go to something, go to one of their town halls, go to the Capitol and say hello in the hallway. Meet them at an event. After that, I know them, they know me. It's okay for me to call them. I will not just cold call a legislator who is not my own otherwise. But your own legislator is typically pretty responsive. So that's a picture of my legislator, Kara Berkland. I don't know if any of you know her. I disagree with my legislator on many, many, many issues. I agree with her on some. She has no idea how many issues I disagree with her on because I typically don't tell her. The only one I think I can remember telling her about is I disagreed on Amendment D. I didn't like that one, and that was important enough for me to raise to her. But I talked to her about issues where I want her support and could get her support all the time. She is not bad on the environment. And I would urge you not to give up on anyone. Even if it's somebody you think you have nothing in common with, I guarantee you will find some things. In some cases, they will surprise you. We've had her over to our house for dinner with her whole family. So she's that kind of person. She's approachable. She wants to put time into it. She wants to do the right thing. She wants to talk to constituents. So when you're communicating, short, clear, and respectful, say what it is you want. If you're just sending an email saying, I want you to vote for this bill, tell them what the bill is, tell them who you are, tell them that you're a constituent, tell them why. Couple sentences, that's it. They don't have time to read a long essay, especially during the session. Please come to the Capitol. Right? They're there, they're accessible. They won't have a ton of time at the Capitol, but they will have some time. You can turn in a slip when they're in session, when they're on the floor, and call them and say, and a runner will go take it to them and say there's a constituent waiting in the hallway. If they can, they will come out. It's not like their own bill that's being heard right then. They'll come out and miss a couple of votes to come talk to you. They like it. My legislator holds a town hall at the Capitol every year. So a couple hours with constituents for the 8 or 9 of us who bother to show up. Politics is a game of showing up. Okay, the best time to get them is now. During the session, they're extremely busy. Go during the session anyway, you probably only get a couple minutes. But now, out of session, they're probably holding pre-session town halls. Reach out, let them know who you are, let them know what you're interested in, set the groundwork for later. You can also testify in committee. You'll probably have 1 minute to testify in favor or against a bill. You can do it in person or by Zoom. In person is more effective. If you're going to do that, organize so you're not all presenting on the same thing. Decide who's going to do it, who's going to prepare. Show up, be ready, be professional, and legislators will invite the public to testify and you'll get a chance to speak your piece. Yeah.
When you organize and go together to give testimony, do you have like different people who are testifying, pick different points to make? Do you ever approach it that way?
The only time when we did the student climate resolution, they all wanted to testify, right? And so, of course, and it's great. So that time only, they said, who wants to testify? And 20 people raised their hands, right? And we did that on purpose. Like everybody's here in support, nobody's opposed to this. They all had their testimony prepared and written, and we arranged in advance what order they would go in because we knew we wouldn't get them all in. But typically they want to hear from organizations. So they don't have unlimited time. So it'll be like, okay, who's representing Grow the Flow? So if there is limited time, you need to pick like who will do that, who will take that role. If there's more time, sometimes like a bill gets pulled and they've got extra time in the calendar, then it's like, fine, we've got 15 minutes for this, whoever wants to talk can. Okay, we are going to teach you how to lobby. We're going to model it, and then we're going to have you pair off and practice it.
Okay, thank you. Oops, did I go? There we go. So, like Tom just spoke about, what we're gonna do is talk about how to lobby. So we want to walk you through this. We're gonna do this really quickly. We tend to do this training, this citizens climate lobby over a couple of hours. So we're just doing a concentrated version of this. But we'll teach you about our lobbying. Then we're gonna do a mock lobby meeting. The three of us will do an example of it here. And then we're gonna invite you to practice it yourselves in pairs just to get a taste for the work that we do. So as far as lobby meetings go, we really, we have one rule, citizens climate lobby, and that is to work with respect and appreciation in everything that we do. I'm gonna go through our one rule, our primary ask, meeting roles and agenda, our mock lobby meeting, and then we'll debrief afterwards. So like I was saying, our one rule is that we work with respect, appreciation, and gratitude. And that's sort of the bedrock of the work that we do because it's so important to, in our eyes, the way we build respect and build relationships is to be working with each other as equals and not, being in a position of bringing up issues that would be detrimental to the movement of the meeting. So as far as the primary ask, what we do is we have we go in with a strategy of having a primary ask for the member of Congress that we're going to meet with. So that is something that we organize nationwide so that we are on the same pathway of bringing attention to a specific issue. So in the case of the Great Salt Lake, it would be determining what would be the most effective ask for the legislator that you're meeting with, and then being prepared to talk about that and make an ask for that. We also will do a supporting ask, secondary ask, and that's something that can also be considered. But we also just really encourage folks to be careful not to have too many asks. It's better to keep it simple and not too complicated, and really look at it more as each meeting is a step in the process. You're working on building this relationship with the legislator that you're meeting with. So the meeting roles, I think now, are you doing the meeting roles?
Go ahead.
Okay, so as far as meeting roles, what we do is we come up with assignments for volunteers that will be in a meeting. And obviously, you may not have 8 people in your meeting, but this is sort of an outline of what's available. So we have the leader is sort of the organizer of the meeting and kind of is the conductor, I like to describe. And it's really valuable to have an appreciation for the legislator that you're meeting with. Tom mentioned like the first point of contact with the legislator. It's always helpful to just start out and write a thank you for something that you can appreciate him for, because it just fosters a vibe or a connection that you may not be able to get otherwise. And it's really helpful in sort of building that connection with the legislator you're meeting with. We really key on how valuable it is to be paying attention to the time that you have in the meeting. So you want to be asking for how much time the legislator has for you. Being respectful of that time makes a huge difference in how receptive they are. And there are many times where legislators will say they have 15 minutes, and because you ask them for their time, and when you get to that time frame and you say, well, we're getting close to the end of the time you had available, they tend to offer more time. And it's just really trying to work with each other to be sure that the time, is respected. Note taker, obviously you want to track what kind of conversation you have, because it's always good to have that information. You can build off of that to have your next meeting, you'll know sort of what had been discussed in the prior meetings, which is really helpful. An asker, so the asker is the one who would be providing the ask about the primary ask, and it decided upon by the lobby team, a secondary ask as well. And then the other items here, we won't go into detail right now, but this is really the basic outline of how the roles will be for a lobby meeting.
So can I jump in one thing there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you may not have 6 or 8 in your meeting. It's a lot easier if you have fewer. We tend to structure our meetings with 6 or 7 people with members of Congress. And we deliberately do this to get everybody involved in the meeting. We're trying not to have somebody just sort of sit there silently. Including people who've never lobbied before, like we want them to have a role.
Definitely, it makes a huge difference when everyone's participating because it not only is something good for the legislator to hear from everyone, but it's an empowering experience for individuals. And I'll tell you personally, when I first went and lobbied, it was an amazing transformational experience to do it. Being a shy person, carpenter by trade, and realizing how valuable it is to be speaking to your leaders and sharing with them what you feel is important for them to be working on. So as far as the meeting agenda goes, we sort of structure it so that we're kind of on task when we have meetings, whether that's in person or virtually. Again, we talked about it in the last slide. You have the thanks for meeting with us, check on time, introductions for everyone in the meeting, and that's something that we kind of prepare for beforehand to try to really be sure that you're quick and succinct in how you're going to share and tell a little bit of your story at the same time, which I think is very important. Always include an appreciation, and then other things here like making the ask at the beginning. In the middle, we want to be finding out what the legislator is thinking about the legislation we're advocating for. So really, we want to be going into these meetings wanting them to talk more than us to talk, because we want to be hearing from them what might be holding them back and what they want and how they want to support what we're doing. And we're always trying to listen and be really good listeners. So just a few tips for lobbying. I've kind of covered these a little bit, but it's really nice, or it's critical really that you are in these lobby meetings and want the legislator to feel that they can speak, in confidentiality, because they're able to communicate openly with you and they're not worried about it being distributed in some fashion in a way that they might not be comfortable with. They're going to be a lot more comfortable about talking with you about what their issues and concerns are. So it would be helpful to say in the start of the meeting that, just to be clear, our conversation is confidential, and that allows the opportunity to have them open up more and what they're able to communicate about their concerns about what you're advocating for. It's always really important to do your research on who you're meeting with, really understanding where they are on the issue, because that's really helpful for you to know how you can step into that conversation. We like to say, be interested and not interesting. So that means you're trying to listen much more or ask questions and getting responses from the legislators rather than having all your talking points and just running through them and not having the opportunity for the legislator to speak. You know your audience and really speak to how, if the legislator is specifically focused on agriculture, work in that agricultural area, because that's a place that they're really connected to. And it's very important also to think about, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And so, it's listening. You may hear things that you may know are not exactly what you've heard from your resources and information. And it's really good to just, be listening and being able to build that relationship, because you're building a foundation that you can work on as you move forward. And then speak from your heart, be authentic to yourself. Why are you there? Why are you concerned about this issue? And I think one of the most important things is when you meet with legislators, if you are, you don't want to be demonizing that individual for something that you feel that they should be doing more or they're not doing enough, but rather what really makes a lot of progress in meetings is to appreciate the things that they are doing. So appreciation rather than demonizing.
Okay, Tom got the interim, so I'm gonna make one interruption. So we do federal legislation lobbying twice a year. Middle of the summer and in December this time of year. I was part of a lobby event on Monday, right, with one of our federal legislators. we didn't have 9 people, we had 6, 2 canceled, and the day of, 1 more canceled, we had 3. We went through all of those steps. There were 3 of us, and it still worked. And it was a really positive discussion, and at the end, these are very conservative folks, right? At the end, the person signed off by saying, I'm really glad we had this discussion. You are not the boogeyman that everybody says you are. So think of what they are thinking about you as you're going into that discussion, right? You're the boogeyman. Change their opinion.
All right, thank you. So now we're gonna jump right into putting it into action. So we're gonna now do our mock lobby meeting. And then after that, we're gonna ask people to go into pairs and practice doing the ask, and then we'll debrief about it. So we have, do you wanna walk through your plans here?
Yeah, the 3 of us are gonna do it. Mark is gonna be the legislator. Bill and I are gonna be the constituents. And I chose for Mark to be Senator Kevin Stratton. He's actually not Senator yet. I picked him on purpose because he's been good on Utah Lake. He hasn't done much on Great Salt Lake. He's not in House leadership. I view him as somewhere around the median member of the Utah legislature. Meaning if we get everybody up to him, we probably pass a bill. Right? Maybe he's better than the median, is he?
Not on climate change.
Okay, I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
So, and I thought we would model doing this around a piece of legislation that I have learned from Jake is upcoming. Rather than something climate change related, we'll do it on the Great Salt Lake and we'll do it on something topical. So it's gonna be a piece of legislation that's gonna be proposed by a Democrat, Doug Owens. Doug Owens passed a similar piece of legislation last year, and we're gonna talk about it. So hopefully, in our demonstration, you will get enough information about this piece of legislation to practice it.
Set up the
Yeah,
scene.
yeah, so we are at the legislature in the hallway, and we've called Senator Stratton out off the floor. And he's graciously agreed to come talk to us for a couple minutes. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'm Tom Moyer, and I don't know if you remember, but we met at the GOP convention. We said hello for a couple minutes there.
I think so.
Yeah. So I'm not a constituent. I'm actually in the Park City area. I'm in Cara-Berkeley's district. And this is Bill Barron.
Hi, I'm Bill Barron, and I'm just a really concerned citizen. I live near Liberty Park, so I'm in your district as well, but the Great Salt Lake is a concern for me, and really concerned about the future for what that looks like for my daughter, and so I'm really wanting to share my concerns about it.
Great. And before we start, Senator, I just want to ask how much time we've got.
I've got about 5 minutes, that's it. I've got a meeting and I've got to speak at that, so you got 5.
I totally understand, and we definitely want to be respectful of your time. And I did see on your mailing list that you've got a town hall coming up next week. So we'll plan on coming to that.
My list, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I subscribe to your list. We'll definitely come to that, maybe we'll get a few more minutes with you then. I wanted to start by saying thank you for the bill you did 2 years ago that really kind of put the brakes on the Utah Lake Development Project. It ended up kind of collapsing under its own weight, but you were sort of the first to step up on that. I really appreciated it.
I'm glad we were able to be part of that. That meant a lot.
You know, I know we're short on time, but I just also wanted to really appreciate for that op-ed that you wrote in Deseret News, on the carbon sequestration and talking about climate. I think it's an issue that's really important, and I appreciate that you were bringing it up.
I think it's a bipartisan issue.
Excellent.
We, when we're not lobbying on Great Salt Lake closer to home, we put time into climate change with our federal delegation. One of the things we work on is bringing Republicans and Democrats together on solutions. So that meant a lot too, to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you know, our focus here is really we're concerned about the Great Salt Lake, and so one of the things that I'm really interested in is working on how we can optimize the water that is going into the lake and trying to avoid losing so much water in that way. And I was curious if you have any specific focuses in that area in water optimization that you're looking into.
I talked a little bit about that in my op-ed and yeah, definitely into water conservation, water optimization. I think there's a lot of ways that we can optimize what's going on now. And yeah, there's great opportunities there.
All right, we have a bill, we want your support on. It might come as no surprise.
Yes, so we were really interested in the water efficient landscape requirements, the bill that Representative Bowens has put out. I'm curious if you've learned about it and then know what it's about. If you have any questions.
I've just been highly brief, just a little bit.
Yeah, it's mainly focused on, you know, limiting the amount of overhead spray on irrigation. And do you have any more details on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the bill from last year, that Senator Winterton was the Senate sponsor.
Yeah.
So you actually voted against the first version of this bill and for the second version, got amended. It was too difficult to pass the first way, it was too restrictive. The first way was gonna ban all turf on government properties. And that got a whole, I mean, everybody liked the idea of government setting the example on water conservation, but that was a bridge too far.
Yep. So
it ended up getting amended, you voted against it in the House.
Yep.
And then it got amended in the Senate to just ban surface irrigation, overhead spraying, right? In other words, required drip irrigation on government properties, and then that went through and we voted for the second version.
Yeah, okay. And this bill is representative of the amended bill, is that correct?
Okay, this bill's gonna take it a step further. And it's gonna do the same ban on overhead spray, but for new residential and commercial construction. Statewide.
Drip all.
It's gonna basically require drip irrigation. It's not gonna ban turf for homeowners. We don't wanna do that. People are attached to their lawns. We're just gonna require them to do it the most efficient way.
Okay,
Tell us how that grabs you. How do you respond to that?
I think I've got to think about that.
Okay.
I think I've got to talk to some other folks and that's a big step for homeowners, not to have any irrigation above there.
It'd be new construction home.
So we have a one pager that gives information about our legislation that we're advocating for.
To leave behind.
Yeah, and you know, we want to be respectful because I know you get a lot of emails and a lot of paper. What's the best way for you to receive information? Would you like the handout or would you like it in your email?
Handout would be great.
Okay, a handout, and I know we're getting close to time. I can see you checking your watch right now. We would like to ask if you'd be willing to consider supporting this bill. We really appreciate the time you made for us today.
Yeah, let me look at it, dig into it. Thanks for the handout. And I'll go from there. Look at it.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
And Senator Winter's gonna be able to answer some questions that we can't, I'm sure. So he's back in this one.
Thank you.
All right, so I always like to name drop whenever possible. No, seriously, like, they're not gonna believe it from me, but they're gonna believe it from their Republican colleague. If there's a Republican sponsor, you bet I'm gonna tell them to go talk to them. So CCL, with one exception I can think of, only ever advocate for bipartisan legislation. Right, we get involved when it's bipartisan. Sometimes we'll be early behind the scenes trying to get somebody on it so that it can be an ask for us. But if it's a one party bill, we're not gonna do it. All right, so let's now break into pairs and you guys just grab, if it ends up being a group of three, it ends up being a group of three. And we'll take 5 minutes and just take turns being the legislator and being the constituent and practice doing a mini version of that. Introduce yourself, deliver an appreciation. You can make something up if you don't like ours. And then ask for their support on this bill. Yeah, question.
If you don't know what legislation your representative has supported, what's the best way to look that up?
So the Utah legislative website is phenomenal. It is like the easiest website to navigate ever. So if you know a bill, you can look it up by bill number, you can look it up by title, you can look it up by sponsor. It's very easy to go back and see who voted for and against it at what stage. It's very easy to go listen to the hearings on it. It's all recorded, it's all available. So we sort of modeled being really, really prepared on this. Like, I know how he voted on the previous bill. I know what committees he's on. I know when this bill is going to get voted on in his committee. You don't have to be like, it's great if you can be that prepared. You don't have to be. You can just go there as a concerned constituent and say, I want you to do more on the Great Salt Lake. The end. That's fine too. Okay.
Could you put the steps up again?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think the next one right there, yeah. Thank you, Grassel. That's a good one to have up.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Tom said about, you don't have to be professional, you don't have to like know every detail. I'm really lucky because I have Tom and Mark who are very and drilled down deep and very wonky about specific topics. But I got into it. I'm concerned. I was a ski patroller and carpenter. I was just really concerned about the issue and the future that my daughter would experience. And I was really intimidated by the process of actually sitting down with my member of Congress and talking with them, and it felt like they were bigger than me. And what I think this exercise is really trying to do is, for if anyone feels similar to the way I have felt in that, is to really break that down and realize that you're just talking to another human being, and it's okay to have these conversations, and be authentic, be yourself, and really share who you are in the conversation.
All right, go ahead and I'll let you know halfway through when it's time to switch.
Who wants to go first?
You.
Of course. You started. Let me get this. Yeah, so, thank you guys for supporting that bill last year, protecting the Great Salt Lake. Protecting the Great Salt Lake. Good. How much time do you guys have?
The best part was saying hi on Grace, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, let's wrap up those lobby meetings and here's some thoughts from you on how it went. Anybody want to volunteer anything? Those of you who have spoken to your legislators before, was it anything like this?
Yes.
What was your context before?
They really are just people. I mean, they have other day jobs. Our legislators are part-time legislators. And so like, they really are very personable, but like they've said, the energy you come with is going to be reflected. So coming to them with, positivity, appreciation, wanting to solve problems, and you'll have a great conversation. It'll be quick. They actually now text interns instead of doing paper slips. So they'll have an intern contact us, they'll text their intern, they'll set up a meeting time and bring the legislator out to you. And, people dress fancy, it's the Capitol, it's all, fancy stone and stuff, but they really are just people. Your heart will be racing the first time and, a couple times and it won't bother you.
Right. It is not as bad as it seems the first time we do it. I had no idea how to do this, except that I learned from other people. I drew it all myself. So tell me what your conversations were like just now.
I think starting with a thank you was pretty impactful. It changes the whole tone. I mean, they may kind of wonder what you're doing there, but as soon as you start thanking them, I think anybody's first reaction is like, oh yes, of course. Tell me more about the things.
It totally changes the whole mood of the meeting when you do that, and it changes it in both parties, right? It changes it in your head too. It's very weird. I've seen, the person who said you're not the boogeyman you're made out to be, like, I've seen that look on their face, and 10 seconds into the meeting, it's gone. They're like, oh, not what I was expecting. All right, what else?
I think it's definitely asking like, what's your time frame and kind of putting that in there if you can. I think it's kind of liberating, and then as opposed to asking questions. I need to keep track of my time. Yeah, it's kind of okay. I get to follow their kind of parameters, and that for much as I want for English. As long as I stick with that kind of they sit down almost like kind of giving them a little bit of, I don't want to say wordy, but like power over the conversation. It's like, okay, now they feel comfortable, but they don't feel like I'm trying to shut that.
You start with respect,
Yeah.
right? But respecting their time. One of their fears is you're just gonna like jabber forever, and they're gonna be like, oh God, how do I get out of this?
Yeah. Ask them what their time frame is, stick to that time frame. If the conversation is going well, they'll likely give you more time. But make sure that you pay attention and stick to it because they very much appreciate it.
Right. At least give them an out at that time. Yep. Right. Give them the opportunity to excuse themselves, and they may have a hard cutoff like a committee meeting. What else?
Speaking from the heart, especially this is an issue where it's pretty easy to speak from the heart, talking about our home and our future for our children. And so I think in our little mom situation, it was just pretty clear they were speaking from the heart. And I thought, I'm not even a real legislator, but I was moved.
Good. You would be surprised at how few people do this. It's not that hard to do. They're super accessible people. Hardly anyone takes advantage of it. You have enormous power if you are one of the few who choose to do it. Because you're in very small company. Others?
I think like doing your research on like, because even though I was on mock one, it was like, oh yeah, thank you for your time. This is, and but actually knowing what you want to say will be very helpful for actual.
Yeah, you only get, in a case like this at the Capitol, you only get a few minutes, you wanna make the most of them. You wanna be like, oh, you weren't even in the legislature when that bill happened. Know your stuff. One more?
I think it helps us reassess really what we actually want. When you have to go tell another person who's a decision maker, you have to express to them what you want. I think it helps you redefine what exactly you want and helps maybe curb your expectations a little bit.
I think it also curbs your grumpiness, right?